Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positively into another crab cake tour. March 6th, we get back out to Fade Lee's. I make good on my cup of Super Bowl. We'll have scratch-offs for the Magic 8 Ball. It has been a lucky one for us. We'll also have the Monopoly scratch-offs later on in the month. Crab cake tour getting back out. It'll be March. It'll be spring training further extended. And Luke and I have talked about the Oriole games being on spring training and streaming. I thought, I was driving past Cross Keys a couple weeks ago, and I said, I'm going to reach to my friend Jim Williams. He is a media examiner, at one point the Examiner's examiner, and long time insider for all sorts of networks and televisions and sports and tennis and even some politics thrown in there. And the first guy that ever told me this streaming Roku thing, it's going to set the ESPNs and the Fox Sportses and the MASN regionals on their ears. I think you and I have been talking about this going back 15 years, Jimmy. First
Yeah,
off, welcome in. How are you? Health's
I'm
good.
well.
Life's good.
I'm good. Everybody's good. You know, I don't think anybody gives you credit, or certainly the credit you deserve, for your in-depth look at Masson from pretty much the day it started till today. So I
Well,
just
everybody
wanted to
was
give you
buying it.
your
I was
pop.
trying to explain to them, and Luke and I have been talking, and
Right.
Luke lives in Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
What's happening with cord cutting? Luke's 41 years old and is
Right.
finally doing the cord cutting thing because of DirecTV. There's a lot of sports fans out there that bought DirecTV to get NFL games, specifically in this market, right? And
Right. Sure.
every market, it's the NFL, right? And then
Yeah.
the breakup happens, and I've explained that I haven't had to figure this out. My wife is a Verizon employee. I have
Right.
Verizon. I do. But that being said, I don't have no Apple TV. I don't have no Paramount TV. I don't
Right.
have no Peacocks. And when all of these things happen, Orioles on Apple TV on Friday night, the Peacocks come rolling from the NFL. I want to watch that Yacht Rock thing on HBO. I thought we had HBO. I don't. And dude, I'm not paying another $400 to watch the three things that I missed this year that I talked about. And I think we're getting to the point with sports
Right.
fans, specifically if my mother was alive, and saying, how am I going to get my O's? How am I going to get my Oriole games? And
Yeah.
the Masson people, and I think Major League Baseball, they wouldn't have an answer for you. And you're a student. They don't really know what they're doing, do they?
Well, can we start with Major League Baseball and work back to Madison because it kind of works that way.
Sure.
Um, you probably I don't know how many people saw it, but there's a story about ESPN uh, and Major League Baseball doing a breakup, and they had 2 more years left on the contract, and they let it go. Um, so why did they do that? Excuse me, just for a second. Um,
Catch your breath.
anyway, what did it? Why did they do that? Well, they did it because ESPN feels they're paying way too much money for the rights for Major League Baseball, given the fact that they now are down to, depending upon whose number you listen to, 60 to 50 percent of where they were at 100 million. They're now down to 50 to 60 million. Okay, which is likely going to be the bottom.
Well, Major League Baseball is not getting the distribution it wants, and
No,
ESPN is just by
yeah,
its own self sort of dying on the vine, right? As a
yeah.
single entity that people want to buy just ESPN or Disney, that hasn't been as good a sell as Amazon or something else, right?
No. What happened is that Major League Baseball and the teams got a little fat, dumb, and happy when they thought all this money was rolling in to from streamers and from other places. So, okay? Excuse me, say I'm fine. So anyway, the deal um, is that right now, um, Major League Baseball pays $40 million to each team, approximately. What they're trying to do when they limp into 2028 is try to get the same deal ish that the NBA got, which was $77 million, which would give each team approximately $70 million a year um, for for rights before they even do local. So that's the theory of the case from Rob Manfred. Whether it will work or not, we don't know.
What's the NFL model, which is we'll get more money if we come into this together, right?
Right. Which actually started with David Stern in the NBA. And it worked out for them. for a while. Anyway,
Well, the
yeah,
local thing, you say it worked out for a while,
yeah,
and certainly the MASN thing worked out really well for the Angelos family, like no one else won.
yeah,
I mean, literally in the beginning, the way Peter negotiated and then fought to literally his death. He fought to his deathbed on that money for 20 years, and the
yeah.
Nationals got screwed for 20 years. Major League Baseball reached into the kitty and gave that. I don't know how it's going to all wash out because Angelos is dead and Rubenstein is perceived as being flush with cash and the wealthiest man, like, all of that. But he was asking friends for money last year, like everybody else, to get in on this thing. And that's how Arrighetti got in on this. And it's a billion eight. And I keep trying to say to Oriole fans, $5 beers and the Birdland value menu, that's not going to buy Gunnar Henderson. It's going to buy you a $5 beer at the ballpark this year. But when it comes time for this franchise to really go and compete financially with the top 8 teams in Major League Baseball, they're going to need to figure out where revenue's coming from. And
Yeah.
Jimmy, I think I'm smart about it. I don't think I'm a dummy. I don't think 98% of the population doesn't care about any of this. I try to drill down with people like you about it. And I'm not getting any of the answers that I want to get that look like math that's going to add up to one day a $200 million payroll that's going to be self supportive here, that's going to be supportive of ticket sales, media, and whatever Major League Baseball's overall contribution to media is going to be. This thing needs to be better run here if it's
Right.
going to be successful.
Or sell it, and an Amazon or somebody like that would
You
be
think he's
willing.
a flip guy?
You mean not the baseball team, but perhaps the perhaps MASN.
Oh,
Um,
well, I don't know who would want the network without the team, right? I mean, that used to be the.
well, yeah, I mean it's right now. We all know we talked about you and I spoke off camera yesterday about Sinclair starting Diamond Group and bought the old Fox regionals,
And
and
nobody liked that deal when it happened, right?
it was a
When
stupid deal.
when that
I
deal
mean,
happened,
yeah,
people like you looked at the math and said that's dirty
yeah,
math. That's the
it's
and
not
and
going
then the Padres are out of business in the middle of the season and don't have a carrier, right?
right. Well, I mean, it's you can't spend. I think it was $19 billion um, on those rights when your outstanding rights, top 60 billion. So,
But the advertisers have to support this, or what the Baltimore Banners model is, which is you're just going to subscribe and it's going to pay for it. I if they put subscription out for the Orioles, how
yeah,
many real Oriole fans there are, and it's $100 a year, $200 a year, $300 a year, which is less than
right,
$2 a game, right? It's only $1.12 a game, or what? Like, okay, fine. How many people are going to a la carte that? And I don't even mean Nationals fans. I mean Orioles fans. Let's
sure,
split them because eventually they're going to be split, right?
right,
Because they're
eventually,
not one team, they're not one market, they're not one ownership. Both of them have. I mean, the Orioles didn't have any problem getting sold because they were so depressed. But
right,
the Nationals learned to even want to sell anymore because he's like, I don't like the way my media is valued. I don't like that Angelos has
right,
been ripping me off. We're not going to sell this for $1 billion less than it's worth.
right. The I think the key to local. Um, the funny thing is when I started this business, as you know, because you and I came in, I was a little before you, but then that's it. But when I first started purchasing and directing, excuse me again, sorry. Um, we had there was no cable in major cities. New York didn't have cable in major
Baltimore
cities,
didn't have cable.
right? So what did they do? In some cases, what they did in some cases is you had your local broadcaster, right? The normal place that we all, I think it was WMAR had at one point had it all. You remember Sheldon Shimmer and all those guys?
Oh, Greg Missoni and
Yeah,
Scott Garceau, and
sure,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
okay. So all that was fine. But in many places where we did, you know, regional stuff, um, it was a deal where you bought a subscription, um, and what local TV station they would lease 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. They'd play movies. Prism started this way in Philadelphia, by the way, and what would happen is you get a little box, which looks kind of like a cable box.
It was called Super TV here,
Yeah,
is what it was called in
it's
Baltimore.
Super
Yeah.
TV in there. It was there was preview, there was on TV, all of those pay situation. And so if you want a season ticket to the Orioles or you wanted a season ticket to whomever, in our case, it was Eddie Einhorn. Eddie had the White Sox and the Blackhawks and the Bulls all on that package. And so
That was
you just pay,
Sportsnet Chicago, right? Isn't that one
well, it
of
was
the?
actually I don't it was sports ticket to begin with, and then they changed it five, six times.
Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, what that was is you get a season ticket, right? So each month would have a little, card. You take that card, it's like the card you have in hotels to get into your room, punch that in there, and then you sit back and watch the game. Um, and that theory of the case when you're talking about, in those days, maybe 60 games, and certainly not certainly not an entire schedule. Um, it worked for a while. And then when ESPN launched, and those days because you were down at the ESPN, was a restaurant that they had down there. I mean, it was a situation where ESPN had to get on cable. They got on cable, courtesy of President Reagan's 1984 Cable TV Act, which allowed bundling, which allowed them to make money. Now, let's circle all that back to today. The reason ESPN has become so, um, cost conscious lately is because they overpaid for everything. And so by overblowing it, they basically ruin the market, not only for others, but for themselves.
When you say they overpay, I
Yeah,
want people because we're getting. If you've been listening this long, Jim Williams is here, longtime media examiner. If you're out in the car, one of my most trusted resources that knows all of this stuff and reports on this as a real media member. Now that Phil Jackman's not doing reading time 2 minutes or being the TV
right.
repairman, I'm going to make you the TV repairman here. But
Okay.
the notion that all of these rights fees became for the Andrew Marchands and my pal John Arand, who cover media, these billion-dollar takeovers of buying rights fees. They're going to spend this many billion. And I would think the NFL, it kind of works out like when Fox got into the NFL,
Right.
put Fox on the map 30 years ago. My buddy Kenny Albert, Baldinger, and
Sure.
all the. I mean, I got a job out of it. George Krieger hired me. Yeah, at Sporting News Radio, he was the one that hired Jimmy Johnson and all those guys
Sure.
back in the Terry Bradshaw, all those guys that
Right.
have been there for 35 years doing it.
Well, Billy
But
Brown. And Billy was
Bill
in.
Bro, of course, from Home Team Sports, right? So I would say the amount of money always had a bunch of zeros and nobody understood it. But what I've always understood is that's basically ESPN saying to whatever sport. It was the NHL at one point after
Right.
the sports channel couldn't get their games on and like all that. It was their way of saying, we're going to make the league important. We're going to put you on Sports Center. We're
Right.
going to legitimize you. You're going to be on, certainly for college basketball recruiting. If you weren't on
Right.
ESPN, you couldn't get a kid, right? That was what the Big East and the
Right.
ACC kind of found out. But I would say for the leagues and for the teams and for the entity itself, ESPN says, some executive says, we're going to spend $1 billion on this sport. Then they have to take their sales department and team and get their dossiers together and then go out and find Gillette or Schlitz or Southwest. They have to find sponsors to underwrite all of these packages. And they wind up, much like BAL and WJFK here, competing with the actual entity to some degree.
Right.
That ESPN's on the street trying to sell baseball for Major League Baseball to Rolaids to the firemen, and Major League Baseball is trying to sell web ads and MLB Network to the same thing, and it winds up being very, very competitive on a sales thing.
Yeah.
ESPN says we have Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball says we are Major League Baseball, and the Orioles come locally and say no, 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 we're the Orioles, or the Yankees do that in New
Right.
York, and so do the
Sure.
Mets. So I think that there really becomes for the money itself. The bid sounds nice for the network, but then the network has to take it in, and the network really isn't the same as the team. The
Yeah.
network has things it can offer, but
Right.
not the all-star game packages and the experiential things that
Sure.
all of these clients, if they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if it's the Coors Light train coming down on the tracks on the NFL, They've spent $1 billion doing it. They don't have any money for ESPN Sunday Night Football. They gave it the office already.
Right. To your point, when I say they overpaid, when I talk about ESPN, at the height of ESPN, they had about 100 million subscribers. They were getting $7 a subscriber. Okay. They were banking money like they were printing money. So advertising, I know advertising always is important, but it was less important at the time because the revenue was coming in from cable subscription. TNT.
Subscription's a good number when you get $7 a head and there's a
Yeah.
100 million of them. It's really, really bad math when you're trying to get $20 from 6 million of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it
didn't
just the
major.
math changes
Yeah.
dramatically.
I didn't major in math, but I realized that ain't work.
But I wonder how many people are going to pay for any of these things. How many millions of people? You said 100 million at the top end back 15 years
What?
ago, 20.
Yeah.
I mean, how
Back
many
in.
people are really going to pay for Paramount at this breakup of all of this, that all of them are going to have a much, much smaller party with a much, much higher price? And I don't know. I'm not sure how important television is where I have all of this stuff for free that I want. And that's
Yeah.
why I don't pay for anything.
Well, I mean, look. At the end of the day, part of the problem, the dynamic that's changed it, is you've got Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Roku. These are not their core businesses. Okay. Apple is not in the television business. They're in the computer and they're in the smartwatch and phone business. You got Amazon, who's in the business of basically selling things, right? They can lose a three, four, $5 billion, and it won't even closely mess up their balance sheet.
It's kind of like when Fox overspent to get the
Yeah,
NFL. It
right,
was a play to make who was the host that did the Johnny Carson show, or Arsenio Hall. It
right,
was it was literally an ad for their Survivor show, right? Like
right. They were
literally that's
promoting.
what it
They
was.
promoted prime time by
CBS, the
utilizing that.
reason 60 Minutes worked and became a star was because the NFL sort of delivered it to some degree,
Yeah.
right?
Well, your audience, right? The game ends, you're right there already. So,
Well, that was the NBC and Disney and Heidi incident back in the day.
right,
That the Disney movie on Sunday night was a family, it was a thing,
right,
and the NFL delivered it. It was the Chiefs and the Raiders in 1971
sure,
delivering that. Football has been such a part of this, and I think during our lifetime, especially since I've known you the last 15 or 20
right,
years, we talk about football as a different sport than the rest of them.
yeah,
It's not football, baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, and soccer's lifted, and the
right,
MMA and like boxing and all of these other niche things that served on the wide world of sports on Saturday afternoon. But there's football and there's everything else. And with football's numbers, baseball's just not going to be that anymore, right? And part of ESPN dumping them is baseball finding its equilibrium, finding its
yeah.
fans, finding its subscribers, and finding its price range. And that might not equal what Scott Boras has been taxing these owners, these poor owners, all these years to get these contracts. I think baseball might be the one thing that goes in the other direction. The top salaries might not go up. And people would say that for 50 years, but I'm trying to figure the math. And I feel the community feel here in Baltimore for this baseball team. I saw the 10,000 empty seats at the playoff game, Jimmy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that stuff wouldn't have gone on here 20, 30 years ago. That's the Angelos tax. That's the
Right.
Angelos damage. And the one time that I met Rubenstein, I told him that. I looked him in the eye and I said, those 10,000 seats, that's trauma. That's civic trauma to the thing you just bought. That's the depreciation of your $1.8 billion asset that you now have to figure out. Peter's dead. You have to figure out how to sell baseball in a lacrosse town.
It's funny because um, I sat down right MASN was getting started with Angelos in his office downtown. And we had a conversation. And the first thing he said to me is, I don't want to talk about who's playing second base, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, I'm not here to talk to you about who's playing second base. Frankly, I don't care. Okay. I want to know how you're going to run a regional sports network where you're going to lose money for the first 4 years. And he looked at me like I was insane. And I'm like, look, dude, I didn't say dude to Mr. Angels, but nevertheless, I just basically said, you know, I've been in this regional sports business now for a while. To ramp up a network that didn't exist 2 days before costs a lot of money. And that's money you're not going to get back until you're down the road 3, 4 years. Because the first few years, you're gonna be spending most of your time, arguing with cable companies why they should pay you and take you on their cable, on their cable system.
By the way, I have the funniest story from the Comcast guy who sat in the room with him, the Comcast guy who negotiated that deal with him.
Uh,
So I got that one for the book, but
there you
I
go.
never wrote it, but I know how that went when Mr. Angelos was hoodwinking the cable companies, and he was personally the one meeting them. Like to your point, like yeah, it's like Trump, like he's just gonna you have to go up to his office and talk to him,
You know,
reason
you,
with him.
it only took me 5 months to get there, but the point being that I think that people are consuming sports now in different ways than they always have. If you take a look, and let's go to the big dog on the NFL, right? The big dog in the NFL basically is if you look at the streaming numbers on Amazon on the last 2 years of Thursday Night Football, that's been their exclusive. You look at the crosstabs, right? In ratings, you want to see what the total rating, but you really want to drill down. When you drill down the numbers on Amazon on Thursday Night Football, they are getting an audience in double digits from a standpoint of rising in the audience, 15% rising of the audience of 18 to 34 men, 14 to 15% difference up above the old Thursday Night Football, in which was on Fox, and then first was CBS and then was Fox. So they're also staying long. They're engaged long. So you look at it and you go, all right, fine. There you go. I see what's going on. The dynamics, the way people are consuming this stuff is a lot of people don't even have television.
Oh right, I watch in the bar.
Right.
You
So you're
know,
watching either on your phone, on a tablet, or maybe
my wife and I went into a sports bar in the
Mhm.
fall, and there was a game we wanted to see. I think we were at Nacho Mama's, late great Nacho Mama's,
Okay.
and it was an Apple. It was a a non-broadcast broadcast, Jim.
Right.
And my wife literally pulled it up, and we watched the game through her subscription on her phone
Right.
at the sports bar because the sports bar couldn't get it.
Right.
And I think to myself, that's bad business for the sports to have bars where the games aren't on. And I think that for the Orioles when they're on Apple TV on Friday night,
Yeah.
and I go to Costas and the game's not on. But you
Right.
know where the game is on? It's on your phone if you have it, right? So you can still go to Costas and watch it on your phone if you want. But we're in a different place on all of this and the
Oh yeah.
way we think about it, right? The way older people think about it versus the way younger people would think
Right.
about it and the come on of sports. Even watching it on my computer. I mean, I saw Bill Maher did a bit 2 weeks ago where like picture in picture, if you have the game, you have to stop the game, move it around, you got boop, 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 boop. In the old days, just back and forth. You've had
Right.
two games on, I hit last channel and it works. On the computer, not so much. I'm
Yeah.
sure they'll figure that out for the kids as far as an experiential thing. But to your point, it's not making people not watch the NFL. It's making them not watch the NBA. It's making them not watch other things. And I keep thinking with baseball, where it's this long, sloggy, old white guy thing in a general sense, and it happens every single night. I worry for baseball because I don't know what they can do to sexy up their game and make it more attractive to people it's not already attractive to.
Yeah. Developing new audiences. And here's where the crazy starts, right? The Dodgers, who got paid that ridiculous amount of $7 billion years ago, the Dodgers have a very bright man running the show there. And I don't know, Stan, right? Stan Castle.
Sure.
Okay. I was when Stan was at the Nationals. We had a couple of phone calls. We known each other from Turner, and I said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "At the end of the day, he said, baseball has to be a worldwide sport." He said, "We need that, we need that ability. We need to be like the Premier League, and on a worldwide basis." And that's where Apple and Amazon and Netflix come in. They offer a world platform. Okay. So the dynamic is there's people aren't going to get rid of cable. Okay. It's certain people, I'm saying, aren't going to be rid of cable. And then certain kids coming out of high school and college and the Gen Z group, they don't need a television. They're used to watching stuff on their phone. They're used to watching stuff on the computer. They can care less how they consume.
And that's been true for a long time. I mean, they're
Yeah,
not
but the
kids anymore. They're
scrolling,
they're,
that
they're
was not,
35 now. These were
yeah,
kids when they were in high school when Obama was president, right? Like
right.
so these are kids that from the moment they were 16 years old had a phone and never ever had a dream of having a big screen TV. Like
Yeah.
just don't. Yeah, like
Okay.
and that would be anybody almost under the age of 40 now.
Yeah.
Anybody under the age of 40 does not feel like they have to have a man cave TV, and they certainly are
Right.
never going to pay a cable television bill. Never.
No. And they're used to it. And that's the thing. They've drawn themselves out to this, what we used to call it the second screen, right? There's third screens now. You've got, you can watch it on your phone, you can watch it on your iPad, you can watch it on, computer, you can watch it wherever it is. And that's the only thing, um, and that's sure that I think is important here is to know that we all are changing our viewing habits in one way or another. Some of us prefer to watch nothing but streaming because prime time is when you want it to be. If you and your lovely wife sit down and you want to watch a movie and it's 6 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, you don't have to worry about grabbing the TV guide and deciding, oh, wait, did it start yet? What am I doing?
We are still in our 50s, so we do when something's on at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, my
Sure.
wife will plan around it much more readily than taping it and watching it, and that's a mindset. I mean, literally just about us being old.
We used to call that appointment television, right?
Sure.
If you want to watch Dallas on Friday night, man, you'd miss that show. Okay. Now, prime time is anytime necessary you want it to be or I want it to be. The only the only difference, it's 2 points. One, live sports and live news. That's it. Everything else, people are cool with either watching it on a stream when they feel like it, but network television numbers have dropped. And and a lot of it has to do with the fact that these streaming organizations, Eddie Q runs Apple. The and he's not even called the program director as we might have called him, or the vice president of programming, or anything. He's the vice president of content. Okay. This is content. I know when you're sitting there going, but think about this, Nisha. When you and I got into business, me again, I'm older than you, but when you got into business, the cool thing about it was that there was newspapers, there was, you know, um, stronger radio stations, everything had an impact, right? Because there was very little in the way of choices in that aspect. Today, part of the problem is we don't have local media anywhere near what we used to have local media. And and so people tend to like, all right, we'll watch the news, but sports is the one thing that will do it. And what Netflix did last week when you know Roger Goodell floated the idea that he was going to build another package for sports um, on the morning. He wanted to do Sunday mornings. He wanted to do at least 6 to 8 games in Europe or perhaps South America.
The 10 a.m. package,
The 10
basically.
a.m. package. And so he floats it out there, and Amazon, Apple, Netflix look at it. That's cool. Netflix says, yeah, that's nice, but I want Fox's package or I want CBS's package. Now I guarantee you, yeah, Netflix, Apple, Amazon, they can write checks that no one at Paramount or Comcast,
See, it's funny. We think of them all as these names, and if you just put the logos up and said
yeah,
rank the logos by wealth,
yeah,
rank the logos by wealth, we would look at Amazon and say, well, Coca-Cola's got to be bigger because they've been here longer, and I've been seeing that for and
yeah,
Xerox and just these names of
sure.
brands, Starbucks, whatever these international brands. But Apple, Amazon, to equate them even to Disney is Amazon's bigger than Disney. that,
Eddie,
that that doesn't that sounds ridiculous because Disney used to sound
yeah,
like the biggest of the big,
yeah.
but they're not, right? To your point, they're not.
Eddie Q at Apple told me that what I want in a perfect world is for you to pick up your phone, your iPhone, and watch whatever you want to watch. Because for us, it's a lost leader. T-Mobile gives away either Netflix or Major League Baseball or Major League Soccer. I can't remember if it was Verizon or AT&T that would give away a Sunday ticket. Okay, so all of these people who aren't, or you and I would have have not uh, classified as options, sports options, or programming people, are now in that business because they want you to keep that phone in your pocket for everything. And if that means they have to buy the NFL to get you there, they'll buy the NFL to get you there because they can, they print money and they can do that. So that's why we're seeing these mergers, and I say mergers, not physically, but that we see the mergers where you've got the where you get the consolidation. So you may have 5 or 6 Major League Baseball packages, or 4 or 5 hockey packages, or 3 or 4, NBA packages, like they just did this deal with $77 million, cut Turner out of it, and brought Amazon in as a partner. Why? Because they can get that money. I mean, if Roger Goodell went today and opened the bidding for the Super Bowl and everything, there possibly, and I'm not going to be hyperbolic here, it's possible that NBC, Universal, CBS, even Disney couldn't come close to the kind of money that the streaming people will give, because the streaming people don't even look at this as I said before, as program. It's content. It's no different to them than if you're going to go on and read The Athletic. It's content.
But
It's
people
all
have to
about
come
that.
to it. That's the
Yeah,
thing. You can
yeah,
buy all the
exactly.
NBA you want. If nobody wants to watch the Milwaukee
Yeah,
Bucks, then they're not coming. Jim Williams is here, longtime media examiner. I want to end on this, Jim. Just
sure,
the MASN part of this and the Orioles part, which is where I began, because we
sure.
went 50,000 feet, and that's cool. Well, that's
Yeah,
why I have you on. But the MASN and the Rubenstein and the Lerner and the National Orioles, and throw Leonsis into this with the monumental thing
sure.
and all of that locally. What does this look like to you, Mr. Expert Guy?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Um, if I were, and I'm not, if I were Rubenstein and Lerner, I would sit down and say, look, we've got a regional sports network. How do we get people to be interested in it? Because we don't have anything else. We don't have basketball. We don't have football. We don't have, hockey. We have baseball. That's the one thing we can sell. How do we do it? And I think I think they've got to get back to giving away 30 games this season. Maybe it's a Monday, every Sunday, Saturday evening, Friday evening, whatever. They need to be getting, people back watching TV on traditional, rabbit ears, as you and I talked about before.
You're
Get
echoing Luke's statement, by the way, too. Luke said the same thing. So, but
you give it, you've got to give the audience something before they, you know, and then from that standpoint, you kind of ease them into, a streaming possibility or something in that regard. But you got to get, that's where I would start. I'd bring back Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon baseball regionally from a standpoint of the Orioles are on channel 13, 11, 10 to whatever. Um, and the Nationals are on in DC, and that's the situation around the country. Um, that's where I would start, and then I would start to say, all right, rather than being in an adversarial position, which we have been since they actually signed the deal back in 2005, um, how can we make this work together? We need to work together, and I think
A
that's the
quarter
biggest
of a
problem.
century, dude. It's
Yep,
been 21 years since he got the
yep,
rights on this,
right,
and he's dead, and it's still it kind of it always reminds me of Trump. Anything that came in its wake is
right.
diminished. Either spiritually, ethically, financially, just
We're
in
all
a
three of
general
them. Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Or all anything in its wake of Peter Angelo's is left lessened, including me, quite frankly, as a human. And this network, for you to have gone in there 20 years ago,
yeah.
I'm sure that you, Mr. Media guy, wanted to have a guy in a suit and a gal in a suit and a news desk and all the things that Nesson had that look like a, a sports network, as you would know a sports. He never had that in mind. It was a way to siphon money and it was an ATM. It wasn't a television network. They never really took it seriously to make it a television network. It was fishermen on and highlight games and anybody that gave him 10 cents to buy an infomercial. The vision of it, he was right all along. He took all of that money, told all of you
Yeah.
experts, go away. I don't need to have a stinking news desk. Who would the news desk even investigate? Oh, me. Right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
so there is none of that. But that's an old-fashioned way of thinking of it because your programming mind was people have to watch it. He's like, no, no, no. People don't have to watch it. They just have to pay for it. I don't care if they
Well,
watch it or not.
he couldn't believe that it was going to take him 4 years to make money back. That was until Comcast, as you were just alluding to a little earlier, sat down and said, "Guess what? You want the Nationals on and on anywhere? We're not interested. We're not interested in marketing rabbit. You can remember the first 2 years, and our buddy Kenny Albert. I mean, hell, Kenny spent more time in DC doing Nationals games than he did in New York at that point in time. So to me, the MASN situation, if you're a fan of MASN, as we both like baseball teams and want to see things happen, they've got to get together and form a unified front. They may bring the Leonsis in on this deal and say, look, guys, two cable sports networks in this region make no sense, never have. And we need to figure this out. And if that means bringing in Amazon to help us or, Apple TV or whomever, let's sit down and let's get it done. You can't have competing interests here. It doesn't work. The fact that Masson started off, with high quality stuff and from a standpoint of the equipment covering the games and all that, and now they've kind of degenerated into, well, we'll put on what we put on, and they're not even sending announcers to games in spring training.
Well, Mr. Rubenstein will fix that, I'm sure. He's got some money. We're in spring
Okay.
training. Jim Williams can still be there. Tell everybody where you're working, what you're doing, and where people can find you, because I know you're always out. I see you on social still chirping about any time anything happens in this space, and not just baseball or football. I mean, literally every sport that you've been involved in. You and I could do another hour just on college and Pac-10 and Big
We have
Ten,
a
and
lot of
like, yeah,
fun.
I mean, well, I'm not even taking you down that lane, but it is complicated right now for people like you that have been following it forever. And I mentioned Andrew Marchands and the John Urans, the people I've had on, Eric Fisher, different people that I know that follow all of this. It is a fascinating time, specifically for baseball, but for all of them, because they look at the
100%.
NFL as being a leader, but they're not in the same business as the NFL anymore.
No, not even close. And John, of course, and I worked together at Sports Business Journal for a long time. Eric's a great guy. Andy, Andrew Marchand, the king of we used to joke with Andrew as being the king of if any network president wanted to sneak something out, he would call Andrew, and Andrew would suddenly break this story, and it was like, it's an inside deal. But to your point, there's got to be a price point where people are just going to say, look, too much is too much. If ESPN launches this upcoming thing this summer at $40 a pop, I'm not going to buy it. I just it just can't happen. But let's just finish your point on the MASN thing. This doesn't work unless you have cooperation, and right now they don't. And I'm not. Is that the new owner's problem? It will be. It is. Maybe he's not prioritizing it at this point. But that's if they either want to do it right and do it together, or sit down and sell it. One of the two.
Well, and I think Leones is going to be the eventual owner of the Nationals anyway. All right, Jimmy, I'm going to let you go. Jim Williams is here,
Okay, my
longtime
pleasure
media
always.
examiner, always in Baltimore, always local, and always informative. I miss you, man. Thanks for coming on. It's great to visit.
My pleasure. And oh, by the way, you can get me at rantsports.com, or you can find me at Bloomberg and Newsweek. So any one of those three
Bloomberg,
places.
Rant, News. See, I told you he's a multimedia sensation. All of my stuff can be found at Baltimore Positive. We're out on social media. Luke is running around covering Orioles. We're figuring out what
Okay.
the Ravens are doing. It's a busy time around here. Next Crab Cake Tour is March 6th. We will be at Fadley's with the Magic 8-Ball Scratch-Offs. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore Positive.